Okay, I'm here today with Taylor Sherwood. I appreciate your time today. And the only thing you are required to tell us about is how you got your nickname Sherbot. And aside from that, I'll give you the floor if you want to kick us off with a bit about yourself and what you were doing prior to the military.
Prior to the military, I was doing drafting. I kind of started that right out of high school. While I was in high school, I took some drafting classes, kind of really liked it, and had a residential like home plan focused. And I was doing that up until kind of the '08 crash, and then that job like really dried up. Um, Then I started a sole proprietorship, um, kind of my own business thing to try to do that, just to kind of keep some work going. My dad was in construction, so we had a pretty good kind of where we were kind of able to work together. He had some jobs that were like remodels and needed plans for the city, for permits, or for we did a big construction project that was a $1 million home down in Oregon. And that's where I grew up down in Oregon before getting stationed up in Fort Lewis. And it was one of my picks to go to. I wanted to go to Fort Lewis. I didn't have it like locked in or guaranteed or anything like that when I joined. But that was where I was hoping I ended up. I didn't want to go very far. And then after kind of a lot of the residential market dried up, I did insurance sales for a little while. And um, I, reflecting back now, I have kind of a different viewpoint of like what I was thinking and what was going on, like in my head, like in the moment at that time. Uh, I would have swore up and down, pinky promise everything that I was going into the military to like serve my country and kind of like do the like honorable thing. And I know in the moment I really did believe that, but I think there was uh some part of like where I got myself to believe that sort of thing. Is there a bunch of beeps going on in the background? I need to stop that. I don't know if that's coming through for you.
We do not hear that.
Oh, well then I'm not going to worry about it. It might just be on my headphones then. Uh, uh, but I think it was more of I was kind of stagnant and stuck, and I kind of like as a male wanting to like kind of make his own way, provide. I felt stuck and stagnant and not moving forward. And the military was a way that I could do that. And it was a way that was working or will work. Because I started doing like insurance sales, and that's not me. I'm not a salesman. And so I was trying different things and they weren't really working. And I think I just kind of latched onto the military as a way to not be stagnant anymore and kind of move my life forward. And I just didn't realize that at the time. I think that was like 2 years ago. I finally kind of put that together. Um, just kind of like thinking about like kind of ego and stuff like that. And um, it was just lost on me then, even for years afterwards. I uh, initially started looking at the Air Force, and they were slow and not really moving forward. And I again kind of felt stuck and I wanted to move forward, and the Army provided that path. Um, I took the ASVAB with the Air Force, and they were just kind of dragging feet, which is probably what they do for everybody. I don't know. It's just part of their process. If you're not willing to wait, you're probably not Air Force material. Um, but I was trying to become a 21 Tango or 12 Tango, whatever they were calling it at the time, which is technical engineer, kind of very in line with the drafting experience I had. And as a surprise, the recruiters like lied about it and said I couldn't do that without being a Bravo first. I had to do that and then reclassify. And um, the job wasn't sold as it is. They kind of spun it a little bit, but uh I don't know if there was any time that I was like real salty about that. Um I think it wasn't until we got to probably the unit and it or well, I guess AIT, which is I don't even know what that means.
I
It's like
think
the
it,
advanced intermediate training or something like that. It's after you go through basic training, so you learn your job. It's I, it's been a while since some of those acronyms are lost on me. Like I don't remember a lot of them anymore. Haven't used them in so long. Um, but it was probably about the time we were going through that like job training where it was like, well, this is not really what I thought I signed up for. Um, but I wasn't ever, I don't think I was ever too upset about it. I felt like basic training was so much easier and simpler than I expected. I remember a lot of the guys were like, "This is the worst thing ever," and I'm like, "This is this is kind of a cakewalk from my expectations." I don't know what they expected. Like, what movies have you seen that made you thought that this was going to be this easy? Like, I can't think of any content out there that would make me think that basic training was going to be easy and not an absolute horrible experience. And I felt like it definitely hit under my expectations. I thought that was very interesting, and I was flabbergasted that there was people that weren't ready for that expectation. Um, and I think it was then when while I was doing basic training, where we found out where we were going, and guys that wanted to go to uh, uh, Fort Lewis were getting shipped to Hood, and guys that wanted to go to Hood were getting shipped to Fort Lewis. And I was like, that was strange, but whatever. I'll go to Fort Lewis and be happy. It was 3 hour drive from home, more or less, to get up here and move. Um, when I moved up here, I was totally too prepared. I came up here with a bedroom set and uh they're like, what are you going to do with this? We're shoving you in the barracks. You're a single guy. And I'm like, what do I do with all this crap? I had like a cherry wood bedroom set. It was like nice stuff that my parents got for me as I was like 18 so that I can when I move out of the house, I have a nice bed set to take with me. And so I ended up putting I think all of that stuff at in Gettings place. Because we kind of clicked pretty early on, and uh, uh, his family and my family, we spent a lot of time together in that all the way through the first deployment and everything, and even a little bit afterwards. Um, so for a while, I didn't stay at the barracks. I stayed with him until I got married and then got BAH and was able to get my own place and finally go off. I think I spent like maybe 1 or 2 nights in the 6 months. It might have been 6 months that I had a barracks room. Um, so that was really cool that I was able to do that. That was nice because my wife, girlfriend at the time, would come up like every weekend. I'd drive down and go get her at least as long as we could. Sometimes duty got in the way or stuff like that. Um, and now I absolutely dread that drive. Like I would do that drive twice in a weekend and not think anything of it. And now it's just a struggle it feels like to get down to see family. So I still got my dad and my mom down in that area. Her folks ended up moving up a little closer. Um, they're in Washington now, but like uh, it seems like I don't do that drive as much as I probably should, going back and seeing family. I wonder if it'd be easier if it was a plane ride. It probably wouldn't.
Who knows?
I don't know. Um, but yeah, when I came to Fort Lewis, pretty much I feel like really quickly went into the 22nd. Like we were with battalion for a little bit, as they were like setting up the 22nd, because I kind of got there just before like the whole big setup, and like there might have been people technically there, but like they didn't have troops yet.
Mhm.
So I was in like those that big push of here's your first chunk of troops. So I was part of battalion for a little bit. I think with their rear detachment of guys that were just kind of hanging out before they got shipped off from the last deployment to go to their new duty station or ETSing and stuff like that. They kind of had like a whole platoon of guys that were either hanging out until they got out or hanging out until they got a new station, and we were just kind of stuck with them. And so we got to hear some of what that deployment was like. If I remember right, they went to Iraq, and so we were hearing a lot of that stuff, and kind of the roadside bombs, stuff that we didn't have to deal with at all, and really either of the deployments that we did in the 22nd. Um, but that kind of started getting the idea of uh, the army and the Taliban or the insurgents, whatever group they are this year. I feel like it changed all the time. Kind of that battle between like who's ahead right now and who's catching up, and then kind of learning and taking over the habits and being able to capitalize on what they were doing. And so we got to kind of get the idea of what that flow is like. Because because that there was a lot of things that came out of that flow in Iraq with like those heat signature things that hung out on in the front of the vehicles,
Mhm.
because they used that to pick up the heat signature, and that would shoot off like the rocket or whatever that was on the side of the road, and then it would hit, this little box with a heating coil or whatever in front of a truck instead of a multi-million-dollar truck with full of troops. Um, so that was a good kind of like I guess skill or lesson to take away from what they experienced, because that was something that I felt like I also experienced once I got to Afghanistan. Um, so I guess that was kind of the most impactful thing that I was able to kind of learn from some of those guys that had done prior deployments, that actually like kind of really mattered as far as what was going on. Um, for our training, uh, I we did a lot of training, and I feel like it was as good as it could have been. You can't really train without being there and doing it. And uh, I I can't think of a single way that we could take the experience and like what we learned doing it and bring it back to the States and be like, let's get you ready. Um, I feel like we had systems, we had plans, we had kind of the operating procedures that we wanted to try to accomplish. So that kind of gave us a framework to work with. And then once you get there and you actually learn the situation for this area, how it works, way things are kind of happening, um, that's really the only time you can kind of like learn on the job. You can't really learn that back stateside or back at Kandahar. Um, so I think I I don't feel like we could have been any more prepared than we were, at least for kind of like I guess my job, which was mainly I was like, I don't know, 95% of the time I was in the Husky. If I wasn't in the Husky, that was a day off. If I was a gunner or a driver of any other vehicle, that was legitimately a day off in my mind. That kind of is a testament to how demanding I felt that job was.
Mhm.
Being the kind of front lead Husky driver, um, and everything else just
Mhm.
felt so simple comparatively. um, it was, I guess, mostly mentally taxing. Like it wasn't a real physical job. Like I mean, a lot of the vehicles, the steering sucks, and you got to kind of work it with that. But a lot of the time, we were turning occasionally. That wasn't that big a deal. It didn't take long before you got used to sitting in a truck for 8 to 16 hours. Um, there wasn't there wasn't really that much that you could do to kind of prepare for some of that stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I guess you could sit the troops in the truck and run them around Fort Lewis for, a couple of weeks prior to the deployment. But then, they don't get that for the 2 weeks of going through Turkey and then going through Kandahar. And your body kind of like probably just gets back to normal by then. And then you go through the suck of your butt being sore, your back being upset because you're sitting there in plates. Um, so I don't think they could have really changed that at all. So I felt like the training really got us ready, at least within kind of my job there. I was a specialist, so I wasn't in charge of troops. This is your job, go do it. And that's kind of at least my viewpoint in that direction for that first deployment. Um, I remember uh, we went through what, like three first sergeants before we finally deployed, I think.
I think we went through two and the third took
The
us.
third we deployed with, yeah. Um, I don't remember much on the like lieutenant and captain side. I'm sure they cycled around probably just as much. But like I was listening to Damona's interview yesterday or today, uh, just to kind of like hear his side because I hadn't seen some of your more recent ones, but I've seen most of the others. And he was talking about the other LTs, and I was trying to come up with what my lieutenant was, like what his name was while we were deployed, and I couldn't get there. It was pretty far into the the interview with him that I finally remembered. I think it's Abrams. um, but I think that's just kind of his job. He's not really involved with the troops. He's more of
Mhm.
planning, strategic, and uh, he was kind of out of my realm and what I was dealing with. Um, as far as uh, getting ready for deployment, it was I think almost 2 years after I was in the company. It was about 2 years since kind of the 22nd stood up. I believe that we deployed maybe a year and a half or something like that. It was longer than they kind of set the expectation that it was like you're leaving within a year when we first got there. And then it was like, well, no, we're not leaving yet. No, we're not leaving yet. And I was like, are we ever gonna leave? um, but they kept trying to set the expectation that it was real soon, and it ended up being like 2 years, I think. Um, so there was a lot of time to kind of put down roots in Washington, and I still live in the same house that I deployed in. We bought our house back in 2010, so 14 years ago now, and so that was great. Uh, Good decision on our on our part. Um, and that worked out really nicely. My military income was the only thing that we had coming in at the time. My wife wasn't working; she was going through school, um, and getting a 2,000-ish square foot house on E4 pay sounds absurd at that time, but we pulled it off and we did it, and we made it work. Um, I don't, I don't think you could do it now. It'd be
Oh.
real. The prices of everything is just so crazy now, and I wonder what's. I haven't looked in a while whether like soldier pay has really kept up with it. Um, and that's not to say it kept up then.
Right.
I wouldn't make the argument that it was enough then. It was you had to plan and make choices, sacrifices, however you kind of want to spin that. Um, uh, about yeah, just before the our first deployment, my son turned 1. So I got to be there for his birthday, and I think it was like 2 weeks after I was on Advon, leaving to go early to go through the GPR training, which is ground penetrating radar system for the Husky. So I went on that, and that was really weird because all the stories of like how you deploy, what it's like when you go there with your company was it was way different than that. It was like, I don't know, dozen people, 18 people or something like that. It wasn't that many. And a lot of it was higher level people that were going there to kind of like get used, like kind of check in on the with the new company that we're replacing and stuff like that. Or I think supply and commo was there because they had training and stuff to do. Um, I think it was like 2 people from each platoon that went on Advon. So there was very few people that were like within my like circle of guys. The rest were just kind of they were, part of headquarters, it felt like. So there's kind of like a divide between kind of these two groups that were leaving. And we were like on a civilian aircraft, if I remember right. And we had to check our rifles. So we didn't have them for like most of the flight. It was so weird. It felt so weird. We didn't have all our guys around us, our team. Uh, that was really weird. Uh, and then kind of we got there and uh, it it kind of felt like we were almost like forgotten or like not accounted for. Like I remember early on when we got into Kandahar or CAF or something like that. That's what Kandahar Airfield.
Yeah.
There was like rocket attacks or mortar or something like that, and we had to get in the bunkers and like our guys from the 22nd that were kind of in our area were like the only ones that went to the bunker. Everybody else stayed in their stayed in their rooms, and we were like waiting around in the bunker going, is somebody supposed to make sure we're not dead? Is there a plan for this?
Ugh,
Where's the accountability?
ugh.
And we're like, guess we're not coming to the bunker next time. So like really quickly, we kind of got the vibe that like it's probably not going to be you if something happens, you know? It
Mhm.
might be, but like by the time it happens, the rocket's already hit something. You're going to the bunker afterwards just to feel good about it. Um, and so there was already kind of like this level of, I guess, worry that really early on started kind of decreasing as far as like being proactive on the situation, and how reactive. And we kind of determined you didn't have to be that reactive to it. And there wasn't any accountability, anyways. Nobody else did it, nobody else cared. That was really wild, though. Like, I could not believe that, 1 week into being here, that like there was so much accountability in our experience up until that point, and then there was like nothing. And I'm sure the guys that came in with the company absolutely felt that accountability because I think they came in and like that same night there was a rocket attack and we're like, crap, the company's here, we have to go be with them. And even then they hadn't really kind of absorbed us yet, if I remember right. Like the Advon crew is still kind of separate still because they had like just got there and like people weren't really tracking us. They're like, yeah, that's a future us problem. It was really weird, but it was also kind of nice. There was a little bit of freedom there, and
Sure.
that was pretty good. Uh, but as far as like the equipment that I was going to be running, I had like a week long course. Maybe it was 2 weeks. I think it was just one though, where we learned um, the this radar system for the Husky. Kind of hangs out on in front of the Husky. So whereas like the standard mine detection for it is like right underneath your ass, between the front and rear wheels, right under where you're sitting. That's where the metal detector is. But the GPR is in front. So now you don't have to drive over the bomb to see it or like sense it. I was like, somebody was thinking here on this one. um, I guess in that sense, I could probably get into a little bit like what was the Husky designed for? The Husky was designed for, if I remember right, it was South Africa to deflate the tires and spread out its weight so that it could roll on top of anti-tank mines, not set them off. And then that's why the metal detector was in the middle because it was light enough that it wasn't setting off what it was looking for. Uh, so I guess it's fine when you plan it that way. Hopefully, there's not a sensitive trigger on those.
Right.
um, but the Husky was like really designed nicely for dealing with bombs. Like it is purpose built for that. Um, it has a very aggressive V-shaped hull, a lot of armor. I'm pretty sure it's the most survivable vehicle for explosives. Um, if you put 500 pounds up against the Husky versus like a RG-31, the Husky people inside are gonna fare way better. Um, and it was also super small, so like it's not gonna absorb as much energy just because of its size. It's kind of like a grater in size and kind of like the way it was kind of designed, I guess. Had a real thin body, and then it kind of had like the front wheels that are nice and wide and the back wheels that are nice and wide. And those front and rear um, like wheel assemblies would like blow off. There was pins that were designed to shear and fail in an explosion so that those like kind of front end and rear end would take the energy with it and kind of leave the soldier stuck inside, or well, whoever was operating the vehicle, since it wasn't really designed for us. We kind of adopted it and changed it to suit our needs. Uh, but this radar system kind of sat out in front, and they sold it as the thing that is going to tell you there's a bomb in the ground, and it could tell you there was a bomb in the ground if you understood what it means. And I would say the GPR was like more of an art form than an equation. There was a lot of like deciphering and trying to understand what was on the screen, more so than that is something that I need to worry about or it's not
Mm.
something. Um, and I'm not real familiar with fishing, but I'd imagine there's kind of a similarity with fish finder because that kind of does something similar, like sends a signal down into the water, it bounces off fish or whatever that are there. You can get depth readings and things like that. And the GPR kind of had a similar, I guess, kind of system or technology where you could kind of see how far down something was. It didn't have like, inches or meters or anything like that as far as what the readout was, but you could kind of tell how deep something was, if it was real shallow or if it was kind of buried. And you'd get different kind of visuals based on what it was. Something metallic has a distinctly different look than like a rock or a jug of homemade explosives. Those two things looked different. The metallic item is going to be very kind of pronounced and stand out more. And like a jug of homemade explosives or like a typical IED would be, it would look more like a rock than anything else, uh, like a blip, like something. So if I'm comparing it to a rock, can you imagine how many IEDs were out there? um, like it might be a little extreme to say it was unusable as the tool they were sold it as, but it's not really far from it. Like they sold it as a tool to find bombs, and I had my success by using it as a tool to um, kind of investigate for a bomb. Primarily, I would see something or for whatever reason, visually, gut feeling, something would feel different or wrong or not right. And then that's when I would closely watch the GPR to see if something pops up there. And that's how I had my most success. If I use that as a oh, there's something that it's GPR saying there's something here. I mean, we our missions would be so long. We would be digging up the road like every 5 minutes and finding, rocks or a soda can that a soldier threw out. Like we're kind of our own worst enemy sometimes. Um, because like that happened. Like we'd see something, it's weird, it's different. It was like maybe something new because you kind of once you've driven a route, a dozen times, you know that, 100 meters in, this signature is going to show up on the GPR or something like that. You kind of learn the route and you're able to kind of find those things that are different. And so there's like, well, this wasn't here last time we went down the route. And, it's a rip it can or whatever that some soldier threw out or a piss bottle because that would show up different. Um, so as far as like kind of skills for the GPR, just being observant and kind of seeing and kind of feeling out a situation and seeing stuff that's different or not right or could be. Um, I think that was kind of the skill that I developed and was most useful to me. Which isn't how I expected it to go. I mean, there was definitely that was part of like, look for, signs of command wire or, things that were get dug in the road. That was part of our training. That was something that we were, looking for. Um, but I kind of felt like that wasn't the primary focus for our Husky operators. And I felt like that was why I had successes because that's what I was doing.
I see.
Um, and I know early on, uh, I didn't have a lot of success, but I also felt like our platoon we didn't get punished for it all that much, I believe, in the beginning. I I was thinking back yesterday if there was anything that like I missed that caused someone to get hurt behind me, and I can't think of a single instance. And I feel like that's probably wrong. Like that's probably someone probably did get hit or hurt behind me. Maybe it wasn't significant. Maybe it was just like a wheel or something like that. And I'm sure that happened. And I'm not sure if it's because I was just lucky. I don't think that's true. Um, because I feel like I would have beat myself up over that. So I think it's more likely that I kind of blocked that out to like keep my confidence up to like not let it get to me. And like I'm sure that happened. I can't think of a single time. I think I blocked out like because I know um some of our trucks got blown up and got damaged and stuff like that. I don't know if they were ever behind me in those instances. Or maybe I just felt like it was outside of my control, so I never like took it as my screw up. I don't know. I was thinking about that yesterday, and that was kind of making me wonder how much of it is real and how much of it is what I made myself believe, at least at the time.
That'd be interesting to see. I was going to ask you, how many IEDs do you think you found over the course of that deployment, just from GPR detection or
Uh,
say,
I know it's over 15. Um, I believe total I found 18. That's the number that's kind of stuck with me over the years. Um, I don't know. I don't know what it actually is. But I think it's 18. Because I know I got you can kind of see in my background some of these coins are those GPR finds right behind my shoulder here, it looks like. I have two fives, a 10, and a one. Um, so I know I got 15 from that. Uh, and I know one I found dismounted. And I think it was just I had a couple more outside of that. I think 18 was the number that I ended up with. And I think some other platoons had more by count. But I also think some of the platoons had like a lot more action. Like I feel like our platoon had less than most of the others. Um, that was kind of how it feels like it shook out to me because I don't feel like there was a whole I don't feel like we got blown up as much as the other platoons. And my I mean most of the finds for a platoon was I think with me in the lead. um I'm pretty sure I assume some of the other guys got some, but for the most part I kind of ran the show as the husky guy.
And I
Earlier
just,
on there was a little bit more of a tandem where we would switch off.
yeah, I actually made a note to talk about that too. We're at about 2 minutes, 30 seconds to our first break. And I just wanted to remind you, I think you got your nickname Surebot before you ever deployed. I think we skipped that part.
I remember
Yeah,
it
two
happening
minutes.
during the deployment.
Okay, then let's wait on that. We got just a heads up, we got about two
Okay.
minutes left.
All right. um yeah, I don't think that happened beforehand. I can't imagine it did.
So let's pause on that story and let's talk about that on break. And I'll tell you
Okay.
when I think I got it. And then how about we just pause here? It's 2 minutes
Yeah.
anyways.
Sounds
Let's take
good.
our first break and then we'll jump back into it.
Okay.
Okay, we're back and the floor is yours. Go ahead and continue your story.
All right. So I I remember getting the Sherbot nickname while we were like on mission out doing routes because over the radio I sounded like a robot. And uh and I was just kind of like a robot when it came to like the GPR and finding things. And um I I mean, at least from my point of view, there was kind of this expectation that if I didn't see it, it probably wasn't there.
Mhm.
Um, and and I that's what I remember when Sherbot came around. But you were absolutely right that it was because I pretended to be a robot during some of our training because we were missing a piece of equipment, basically a robot with an arm and like a little grabber hand and stuff like that to kind of poke at the ground and mess with IEDs or place C4 so that we could blow them up. And we didn't have the equipment, but while we were doing these training things, we had to simulate it. And so I became a robot and went out there and did the functions of the robot. And that's where Sherbot came from, a mix of robot and my last name. But at that point, I don't think it really stuck. I think it was just a thing we used then, and it became my call sign while I was in the Husky, and that's kind of when like I owned it, and it was almost like a persona, I guess. Um, it's abnormal for, an enlisted, lower enlisted to get like a call sign. Like that's pretty abnormal. Usually you're like the truck commander call sign, and then like you get a T for oh God, what was T? I don't know. There was Delta for driver, and then there was G, golf for gunner. I don't remember. I feel like there was a T, but maybe there isn't.
TC maybe. I don't know, but that
I
would
don't
have been
know.
like dash. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Maybe for I don't know, interpreter? No, that sounds weird.
Oh, well, no, they wouldn't call it. Yeah, who knows
Yeah.
at this point.
Um, so it's abnormal for like an E4 to have a call sign, let alone a call sign that battalion and brigade like no.
Yes.
Like that was wild. I don't know, we were out somewhere with where brigade was or battalion or something. Oh, it was probably when I was doing I went to the promotion board. I feel like that was kind of halfway through maybe or so. And I went on mission the day of, or the day before the promotion board. They sent me out that night along with everybody else that was going. I think half of us failed the PT test because we got there at dark 30 and then had to do a PT test in the morning. That was frustrating, at least a little bit. Um, and that set back my career years. Yours too, probably. Um, and I think that's probably why I was around like battalion and brigade, and like they knew the call sign Sherбot. They didn't know me. They just knew like this person, this husky operator, and like that I was racking up fines, and there was success, and I I can't come up with like a miss that I had. There's probably one. It's like I I would be very surprised if there was IEDs that I didn't miss. Like if I got everything, that would be absurd.
I just want to inject real quick and say your reputation preceded you because we all the platoons had different missions and stuff. So I never, well, actually, we were talking, there was a mission we went on together, but that would have been rare. But we heard about how good you were on the GPR. So you can be completely confident you were that good. And we had heard about how good you were in another platoon. So
Yeah, and I mean that went up to battalion and brigade, and like I was having success with the GPR, and that was kind of unheard of. And like even the guys that like trained, like they sent contractors out to like talk to me and to try to like figure out like what I was doing because like nobody else was kind of having the success. It's not that they weren't finding IEDs, they weren't using the system that they're trying to pour all these billions of dollars probably into. And so they're trying to figure out like what my secret sauce was. And if they had the true answer, I use it to look at something that felt weird already. They probably wouldn't like that. But I did find the GPR useful. It's just not useful the way they wanted it to be. Um, I don't think it was my first find, but one that really stood out to me. It was on a route that kind of came in, after, several months of being there. And uh, vehicles were getting blown up on it, and they like EOD didn't know like what kind of mechanism. Like it was like this new thing that was defeating us. And it kind of gets back to like, you know, at that point they had figured out how to beat us, and we had to figure out how we beat them back. And we just had no idea like what the explosive type even was, like what we were dealing with, because nobody found one. And I remember that was a big find that I had because I kind of solved that. I was able to identify one. We got EOD out there, they were able to look at it and figure out like how they were doing this. Because the weird thing was there wasn't like they didn't put things on the side of the road, like piles of rocks to say, hey, avoid this area. Vehicles were moving up and down that road constantly that weren't ours. So, like, little Toyota trucks and motorcycles and things like that. And like, we're like, how did they not get blown up? And why are we getting blown up? And I call this the dog bowl IED because what they had was their IED charge. with an anti-tank mine on top, or not anti-tank, anti-personnel. So a little small one. And then they put like a metal bowl, like a dog bowl, on top to cover it. A Toyota truck can run over it and it doesn't crush the bowl. But when our big heavy armored trucks come in, it crushes and sets it off.
That's
And
brilliant.
yeah, yeah, that was uh that was a great solution that our enemy came up with that affected only us, and they didn't have to have some of the markers or things that have been used in the past, and they didn't have to worry about like that, hitting the locals and stuff like that. Um, so I imagine the locals didn't care if it wasn't going to bother them. They wouldn't care if, their people are digging up their roads and putting bombs in them. I mean, it's an inconvenience once there's a crater, I guess.
That's true.
Uh, so that was kind of a good find because um, it was a metallic signature, which is a large metallic signature, which is something that we could use to like find. We could use metal detectors because it's going to put off a big signature, something that's, big and metal like that. And the GPR is going to look different than almost anything else you're going to see on a normal road. Like it will look kind of like a crushed soda can in the road, but it's going to be more pronounced than that. So the GPR, we kind of had an idea of, what kind of signature it's going to look like and what to expect, and kind of keys to kind of focus things in on. Um, and the way I found that is we I don't remember what route this was. I know it's you come out of the fob, you turn right, go down the main highway, and then you turn right, which I'm pretty sure is north, and um you go up the dirt road, and then you take a left, and there was like a cop or a strong point or something that we turned around, and while we're turning around, they came through, dug the hole on the route, placed this in there, and then like smoothed it back out. And as we were coming back, a lot of times when you do a route like that, you're just kind of cruising on your way back. You're
Mm.
not really paying as much attention. And they dug it right in the tire tracks of a vehicle, and it was all smoothed over in one little spot. And I called an all stop, and I was like, "This is weird." Checked it out. I was like, "This is even more weird now." And so we investigated it, and we found it. And this one was really wild because a lot of the IEDs we found were like jugs of stuff,
Mhm.
some sort of homemade explosive stuffed into a jug. And these were like manufactured, like somebody has like a press or some sort of mold that they were using. It was about the size of like a pizza, large, maybe a large pizza, medium pizza, something maybe like 16 inches across, and it was like a perfect like cylinder shape that was about like an inch and a half tall, I remember. And it was just like wrapped in plastic. It was formed in a mold and like compact and pressed and like taped up. And that was like their charge. So it was really thin. It wasn't like real deep, so you didn't have to dig that far. Probably really great to stick in like the moon dust, the real fine um dust and things like that, because you don't have to dig very far. So it made it a very like it was probably only like, I don't know, 4 or 6 inches tall, the whole thing. So that was really interesting because it felt very purposeful and manufactured in a way that most of the things we found weren't. So I imagine EOD found that extremely interesting as far as like their kind of data and analytics, and I don't know what came of that. Like they probably could trace that to, somewhere not in our area that got shipped over or whatever. I'm sure there was something interesting that came out of that data. Kind of wish I had
Right.
it.
Probably
um,
Pakistan.
yeah, who knows? It felt very weird and different, and it kind of it beat us for a while. And then once we kind of found the success and figured out what we were dealing with, other platoons started finding stuff instead of getting blown up. And so that was really great because we were able to kind of like figure it out, share the information, and other units were getting the benefit of that. Uh, so that was really awesome. Um, Kind of one of the big moments for our platoon really early on was when Rear and Cosman got hurt. Um, I I was probably on that patrol. I think I was. I'm not certain. I know I've at least heard the stories, so like I know what happened and stuff like that. Um, there was another IED incident on that same route I feel like it was the same day. Like I'm convinced it was the same day because that's why we were like there and we were a target. Um, and kind of allowed the that ambush to happen. And um and it was also very early on, and it was a small ID just off the road at our turnaround point that went off on my tire, didn't even pop it, just puffed a big bunch of smoke, and apparently knocked the cover of the air filter off into the dust, which later became an EOD trip, apparently, if I remember right. Uh, and I think when that happened, that kind of made us the stationary target. And when that ambush happened, that's my memory. I'm not sure that's true though. I know they were both very early on in the deployment, so I might just be kind of like timeline meshing things together. Um, uh, but yeah, that was the infamous AT mine in second platoon. Because so the IED went off on my truck, and I started kind of moving up the road or up the route, and the other Husky behind me was kind of like doing like some secondary sweeps and kind of looking, and they found that air filter cover and called it up as an AT mine.
Oh my God.
And it was super early on, and I'm pretty sure QRF and EOD came over, and this is on that route that's like just across the road from the fob, and I'm pretty sure EOD came out, and I can't imagine the ass chewing that came up from that. I'm sure somebody got their ass chewed. I'm glad it wasn't me. But that was a very infamous moment that I don't think we like outwardly shared that because that's pretty embarrassing. Um, to be calling up EOD for a air filter cover of your own vehicle, and
It's funny, but also like you're so new in theater, you don't
yeah,
know what looks like what, you know.
yeah, and I think that's kind of what it was. It was like we were still very green, like we were figuring out how the plans and the systems that we were trying to use play into like how we're going to work and accomplish our mission. And so I think it was just kind of, one of those moments where you haven't worked out the kinks,
Mhm.
and uh, embarrassing stuff happens. And uh I'm glad we didn't try to bip it. That would have been
That would have been worse.
well, it would have entirely gotten covered up. Like we would have said, "Hey, we took care of an anti-tank mine."
That's
And
true.
as far as our like platoon reporting went up, like if we didn't recognize otherwise, like one, that's a failure of BIP because that's a bad identification.
Hmm.
Because that's something you need to identify. Like you can't just take some Husky operator's word that it's an anti-tank mine and then put a put a charge on it. So I'm glad we didn't have that as a failure of our team. It was just I feel like we learned from that and determined that we can do better at investigating and calling things up before we start getting, EOD or IED 9 lines and stuff like that going. And so that kind of helped improve our processes and improve, how we're going to operate. Um, but yeah, we sure had to do it in a hilariously embarrassing way, didn't we? I'm sure each platoon has some story of something that, they don't want to get out there, and I'm not going to name names for who that was. Um, I'm sure they remember it, and I'm sure a lot of our platoon does too. But I doubt most of the other platoons know. I don't know. Maybe some of them do.
It's the
They do
first time
now.
I've heard of it. Now they know, right?
Now they know. I put it out there. Um, but yeah, that was, I don't, in my memory, that was the same like event with Rear. And then like during all of this kerfuffle, Rear was sent, back to the cop or the fob to get taken care of. And um maybe that's not how it shook out. I don't know, but that's kind of what I remember. I'm I can't I remember that like a lot of the big interactions for our platoon, I was, around or involved in. And I think the second big one after Rear was Sergeant Mack and Grimes, and that mission that I think some of the other interviewers kind of covered in a depth that I couldn't hope to, because they had different roles as far as like Sergeant First Sergeant Gordy's being on the ground
Right.
and going and doing that. I was in the Husky. There was two guys from second platoon that got attached to first platoon to go on this mission, Sergeant Mack and myself. I was out there as the GPR guy, and we were moving down the road, and we had some dismounts out. I'm pretty sure the entire plan was to just have dismounts kind of on the road as we were going, just to kind of be different and weird and special since it was a named thing. I don't know. Somebody made a plan. I was just driving a truck. Um, but I know like once we got to the end of the road, where kind of we were planning to turn around and check things out. I remember that we were gonna check out like a cache. Like one of the buildings was supposedly like a weapon storage or something like that. And I think it was the building that actually had the IEDs on the roof. At least that was my understanding. It wasn't really within my scope, so I probably didn't like capture the entire details of it. Um, but I kind of had like the broad strokes. So I'm not certain on that stuff. That's just kind of what I remember. But I know I found an IED kind of in our turnaround area that we were planning to use. And it was, if I remember right, it was a pressure plate IED. And uh, I didn't find it or detect it with the GPR or like visually, but I had the rake on the truck and had the rake drop down. And when I went over it, the rake kind of grabbed some wire and pulled it out. So it basically was not going to do anything. And I kind of inadvertently dismantled it, which was a pretty successful way that I found as well. I did that with a lot of command wires. I think probably at least 4 or 5 of like my finds were command wire that I just kind of swooped off on the side of the road, pulled up the command wire so we didn't have to worry about that bomb going off. I just got lucky that I dismantled it instead of setting it off. So go me. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Sure.
Um, and so that was going on, and then like the troops were moving around, and we were trying to figure out like what we were going to do with this. Well, the guys were out there, and LT probably had he was going back and forth with dismounts and trying to figure out what we're doing. Um, the ID wasn't that big of a deal because I kind of pulled it apart, so we didn't really have to worry about it like going off or anything like that. It was more of just there. Um, but I know that like when the IEDs on the roof of that building went off, and we had casualties, and we were calling in helicopters. I maneuvered myself on top of that IED, so we didn't have troops like moving because like they don't know where it is. They're running around because there was like fire coming in and probably rockets. I don't know. Um, Gordius kind of takes that account much better than I could as far as what they were dealing with. Um, but there was a lot of chaos. So like the helicopter doesn't know the grid that this IED's at. The troops on the ground know that there's something somewhere. Like they don't know where it is. So I parked my truck right over the top of it so that nobody could, mess with it or deal with it in case it was still a threat. And we don't want a bird landing on that spot as for the LZ. Like that would be horrible. um, it sounds crazy to say, but like in the moment, I knew that's exactly what I should do. Like there wasn't hesitation. I knew that that's where I needed to put myself to help, kind of the situation since to help mitigate some of the risk. And I just kind of I felt like I accepted a little bit, but I diminished everybody so much more. Um, so yeah, I just felt like that was, you know, what I had to do in the moment, and sounds stupid and probably was stupid, but it was right, at least in my opinion.
What were you, I mean, take us a bit more into your world, like all this is going on. We know what you did. What were you thinking and feeling as all of this is going on?
Like in this mission itself,
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, you can,
or kind of uh I
the
mean, that
mission
mission was kind of
itself, but
boring
like,
for me. I had a very small part to play, and I was mostly just chilling in my truck, waiting for other things to happen. Um, so I guess on the plus side, that was kind of nice.
Mhm.
Little bit of work, mostly a day off. Um, but uh there was a lot of chaos. At least it felt like there was um there was probably some communication improvements that we could have had with the dismounts and the vehicles. I felt like there was a lot of leash given to the dismount team as far as like some of that communication, and that's probably fine considering who was on that dismount team. Like that was the best of our best. Like we don't need to rein them in. Maybe we should have, and they wouldn't have ended up on a roof. I don't know, but you know, uh, I did feel like there was kind of like they were doing things and we didn't know what they were trying to accomplish or where they were going to go. And like for our security trucks, they're, zones of fire. We want to minimize like those zones being in front of the troops. And I felt like there wasn't very good communication in that. But although visually the gunners probably also see where these guys are going because they have a much better vantage point than I do sitting in the driver's seat of a truck. So realistically, it was probably fine, but it felt as a driver, um, like like we could have a better idea of where they were going. And that would be useful because at one point I thought they crossed the road and they were like over in the building, like right adjacent to where this IED was.
mhm.
Like I thought they were like right in that IED area, um, next to the building, but they were still over on the like probably 100 meters away. So it was a little bit of kind of confusing and trying to figure out what was going on with that. Um, and that was just kind of uh, a special operation that I was involved in.
So, I, and I always preface this with, and you're told before the interview, you don't need to answer anything you're not comfortable with, but I do want to dig a little deeper on there. What do you recall after the ID goes off on the rooftop? Like, when are you aware of what has happened and what are you thinking and feeling in those moments?
Um, I think for the most part, I don't think I really knew who got hurt until like just before the helicopter came in, maybe. Um, uh, I know like Sergeant Matt getting hurt and like losing him and his presence in the platoon was like he's like a big morale guy. Like that was a big morale hit. That was a defeat more so than almost any other person. Um, because like I would look at him and be like, he is the best soldier in our platoon. Like he is the best of our guys. He is the most Hua. um, and yeah, so that's kind of a big hit having like, this guy that you look at as the best getting taken out. And uh I mean, you also got to kind of look at that and be like, if him, it could be anyone.
Yes.
And um yeah, so there was definitely a different feel to the missions and the platoon for I think I don't think we went out on mission for like 2 days because of it. I remember there was a period that we didn't go out because of how it hit our platoon. I don't know if they like did that because of, the impact it had to us, or if it was more of they need to deal with this and get right before we send them back out. I don't know how much of it was kind of managing that, um, and being proactive or reactive to kind of how the platoon kind of took that. And um, I don't remember if the platoon knew before we got back from the mission or if they brought him in afterwards. I don't remember if they knew beforehand. I don't remember if second
Before,
platoon knew.
you mean before we got back from the mission, if second
Yeah,
wasn't there? Okay.
I don't I don't remember if they knew or if they kind of brought everybody in and was like, "Hey, this thing happened after we got back." I don't remember. Um, I know I know we came together like that with Parker when he got injured. I don't remember if they brought us all in to like talk about it after the mission. I think they did that while we were still on the mission or coming back from it. Because I don't remember there being kind of a getting the whole platoon together to like talk about it.
Mhm.
I do remember that with Parker though.
Thank you for going deeper on that.
Yeah. And then before I get to Parker, just before um that kind of time, um I, as a soldier and a man, had a giant internal struggle with uh, do I look like a bitch and run away? Or do I stand in what I felt was absolute danger? And it was like a dismounted thing we were doing. We were clearing some trees out and they had like a unit blowing up trees. We had the Doe King out on this mission. And I remember the Doe King, it's kind of like a bulldozer that's robotically controlled, kind of small. Um, and I had a couple different attachments. I remember when we were using it, we had the roller attachment, and it hit something. Rollers flew. One of them ended up on top of a a mud hut,
Nice.
like next to the road. And like these are massive wheels. Like I don't know how much these things weigh, but I assume over 100 pounds each. They're like massive steel wheels, and that thing went flying and had a dent in it and stuff like that from it. I don't think we got that back. Maybe we did. I don't remember. Um, but that was wild because that just kind of gives you an idea of like some of the energy that's being like expelled from these explosives. And that was just one of the many wheels that went places. Um, but later on, I think it was day two, if I remember right. Um, and um, I was working with, I'm pretty sure it was Sergeant Wong. I was using the kind of handheld uh, GPR detector. It does metal and density all in one sort of thing. And I was clearing this area, and I kept coming to this thing that was like, this seems like a thing. It feels like a thing. We should check it out. And he gets down and he starts like digging at the ground with a knife. And I'm like, I can't stand here. I shouldn't stand here. I don't want to walk over there and be like, and I was literally pacing, like moving away and then coming back because I was, like ego and trying to put on that mask of I'm not afraid. And that was that was a wild moment because to me, like there's an IED here. Like we're
Mm.
we're poking at an IED with a knife, like a pocket knife. And I know I should be over there. I should I should be, 20 feet away at least. Um, but I felt like that was the wrong thing to do in the moment. Like, and so I was literally pacing on this road or this little trail that we were investigating. And and that was just kind of like that internal struggle of what do I look like versus uh, you know, self-preservation.
Mm.
And um he dug at it for a little while and he's like, there's nothing here. And then I checked it and I was like, I this feels like something. I keep getting all the indications that it's something. It feels like something. Maybe it was deep down. I don't know. We didn't find it. But he dug at it. He humored me and dug at it some more. And there was a point where he was kind of prying some of the dirt up, and there was like a rectangle, classic, uh, classic pressure plate, like wooden pressure plate size for like every training we've ever done. And it just this chunk of dirt moves up in just that shape, and we both look at each other and we're like, oh shit, it was nothing. It was just the dirt just moved in that size, and that was a heck of a moment.
3 minutes, just so you know.
Okay. Um uh One of the questions my son came up with for me was are there any animals involved in some of the operations that we do? And I do recall during this mission, we did have a dog handler. And um, at the time, like, we kind of understood, like, the dogs, they can find things, they do their thing. Like, we don't know, like, how it works or what they do. We, at least from my perspective, we just knew that they could, find bombs. They could find IEDs, they sniff it out, whatever. And so the dog was, well, at first, I think myself and I want to say Robeson, um, but I don't know if he was still there then or if he left later on or something. I'm not sure. Um, but we were using, is it the Goldie? No, the Goldie's for like wire.
Fire.
But we were using the minesweeper to kind of clear this area, and we got called off from it, and we're like, oh, let's have the dog do it. And we're like, yeah, why not? He's here. He can check the area out. And so the dog was kind of checking this area out, and there was like this little shed, wooden shed, that the dog kept being interested in. And so it would kind of like start clearing the area, and then it would just be like, this is a thing. There is something here. And the shed was off the route enough that we're like, we're not going to deal with it. We're not going to mess with it. It can just be its shed and whatever's in there. And so we're like, okay, this little area is clear. We put all our bags. We were walking all over this area. Like everybody in the platoon that was on this mission, we all stuck our bags and all of our stuff in this little clearing that we were working out of. And little did we know there was an IED there. Good time for a break, huh?
Yeah, let's pause there. We got less than a minute. Let's pause there. Okay, we're back in anticipation of finishing the story, the IED.
Yeah, so and this IED was right underneath all of the gear, the ground that we were stepping on to put these bags down. Like, I don't know how many people stepped on this IED and it didn't go off. Like, it could be dozens. I it's it feels absurd. Um and I suspect what happened was the dog that was clearing the area got such a strong hit on whatever was in this little shed that it like overloaded senses and it couldn't see it didn't pick up on the IED that was like in the area. I think there was there actually I think there actually ended up being two. One where we put the bags and then one just like barely on the side, like next to like there was like a stream or a river or something like that. Um, and so we put all our stuff down in this area and we kind of continued our operations. This probably happened before the whole like knifing and potential IED with Sergeant Juan. Um, and uh, I'm pretty sure uh, there was an engineer group that came in to down some trees, and they were kind of like I don't remember what they were doing, but they were blowing up trees, putting some C4 on them or something. We kind of cleared the road, moved out so they could go do their job. And then we came back in, and somewhere in the process, maybe just from the ground kind of shaking and moving, I spotted an IED, a rectangular um,
Okay.
pressure plate next to like this area we've just been walking around. It was like real close to where the ground sloped off into I think it was a stream. So it's reasonable that nobody actually did step on it because that'd be kind of close to the edge of the stream. And so I remember I had a spray paint. I was using the spray paint to blow the dirt off of it as it was spraying out. And we kind of marked it. And we're like, well, I guess we got to clear out this area. And we had a Doe King like right next to this. We had all of our gear, and that's when Parker got hurt. He went to go grab his gear, and maybe just from like the shaking of the ground from these other charges that had been going off to like clear trees, it it maybe it just shook things loose so that that pressure plate worked again. Like this is an area that hadn't been like traversed in probably years. And so these might be like year old, 2 year old charges that have just been forgotten and left. Um, I remember there was some aspect of this is, an area that used to be used and traversed, but it was just kind of like given up and it wasn't used it for a while. So like this could be like year old IEDs, 2 year old IEDs. I don't know. Um, so that's kind of my assumption is over time, for whatever reason, like something got in the way and that IED wasn't that pressure plate wasn't working because we trampled over that place. Like there's no way somebody didn't step on it.
Mhm.
And Parker went over, got his bag, and the thing went off. And um, I think there was also a backpack of like C4 in the area, and I think that also got set off from it and also added to his troubles. Um, I'm not 100% on that, but I think there was a bag of C4 that that we assumed just was also involved in that same explosion. Um, but yeah, we were in the process of trying to get the area cleared out for this little IED we just found, and that thing went off, and that I don't think it was that big. Like, yes, he has like lifelong injuries from this. Um, but man, that shockwave hit me way more than I would have guessed. I I was maybe 20 feet away. Sergeant Juan was standing next to me. I had some cover from the Doking. So like I really only took it to like the face and the head area. Like I didn't feel it in my body. Um, but I would I would equate it to Lamond taking a 2x4 or 4x4 and just smacking you as hard as he could upside the head. And it was wild feeling just from that shockwave of it. And I was, 20 feet away or so. Um, Sergeant Juan, he he was on the ground when I finally kind of like orientated myself to like what was going on and kind of like focused on anything. And so I immediately went to be like, "Hey, are you okay?" He seemed okay, dazed. I mean, his brain's been rattled enough times that there's a recovery period for something like that, I assume. Um, and it was, I mean, it was probably much quicker than I realize. I think just kind of with the gravity of the situation, like time kind of slowed down. And it felt like, I don't know, maybe minutes to me before I realized that Parker was injured. Because at that point, like I wasn't looking at Parker when it happened. It was like maybe in my peripheral, but I think mostly I was not looking in that direction. So I don't know like what happened or who it was at that point. It was just something happened. Um, and I remember kind of off in the distance, LT and I think Shaloon um, were kind of off in the area, like maybe trying to figure out what was going on. And they were like, Parker's hurt or something like that. Something clued me into like looking around and seeing what was going on. And like once I figured out Parker needed help, like there wasn't any hesitation. I ran there. Sarwan was fine. He was dazed. I couldn't help him really.
Mhm.
So I immediately went to Parker, and I was so out of sorts. I I was lost at finding a tourniquet. I have like four of them on my body because like that's how you roll in the husky. You have one on each limb. Like if something happens, you're putting that on because it's going to be a while before somebody gets to help you. Like you're going to have to save your own life in the husky if you lose a limb. I have four of them on. It doesn't dawn on me at all that I have these. Like I think it's because we didn't train that they were there. It was just a procedure that we adopted when we got into country. I used the one in my IFAC. I pulled that out and used it. Um, and I did the right leg of Parker. I put the tourniquet on his right leg. I'm pretty sure I put two on one limb. I think it was the right leg, but I think it was his right arm because his right arm was there was less to work with, as far as like being able to get it to hold on to something and actually affect an artery. Um, During that time, I there was like a QRF unit or a medical unit that came. Somebody else did the left leg. Um, and I'm pretty sure it was on his right arm. I put two tourniquets and then one on his leg. Um, but I used the one that I had, and then I was like looking for his, and of course that thing got blown off. Like the the IFAC wasn't on his person anymore. Um, I don't remember where the tourniquet came from. I just remember I was asking for him. I need a tourniquet. and uh, somehow I got one. Maybe I figured it out. I had four on me that I hadn't used. I don't remember. But uh, I got two on his arm, and um, I remember there's like moments and parts that like you're never gonna forget. I'm never gonna forget the smell. That is something that's gonna stick with me for forever. Um, and just kind of that smell of burnt flesh was that was always going to bring me back to this moment when I'm putting these tourniquets on, trying to help save his life. And I see I see like the life just kind of like draining from his face and his eyes. And looking back on this, I learned that first aid is more than just taking care of the body. Sergeant Juan, he he came and took care of Parker and got his mind back in it. He pulled him out of, he started kind of pulling him out of shock just by talking to him, being there for him, reassuring him. And I think that's a something of our training that I think we kind of miss on and probably could be improved is because once Sergeant Juan got there and started like addressing that part, like he just kind of addressed the mental side of it with Parker, and he pulled him back from like this internal battle that it like physically it looked like he was losing, and it kind of brought him back into the fight, and he looked better. He at the end of it, I didn't feel like we were going to lose Parker. And uh I don't know how Sergeant Juan did it. I don't know what kind of voodoo magic he used. um but like he he pulled him back and got Parker back in the fight. Um and that was something that really stuck out to me. And that's something I've tried to bring to my son's Boy Scout troop as they do like first aid training. I mean, not to like this kind of like severity, but just to bring that like emotional side of it. First aid isn't just taking care of the body. You got to also help the mind. Um, so I think that's something positive I can pull from this and bring to some of our youth and some of the things I've been involved with since. Um, I guess just a little small piece. Um, but that was a really tough moment, and like I think these are like our biggest losses of for the platoon. And you know, I was the only one there with Sergeant Mac from our platoon. Probably half of us were there with Parker, and there's very few missions I went on. So like I got everything that I feel like our platoon could have mustered for me to be involved with. I remember one thing um that I missed out on because we I was out on the mission, and we found we found an IED and we were investigating it, and logistically I couldn't get very far away. Um, Getting the vehicle kind of like away from the investigation site was not very feasible, and the arm of the husky just with the like little thumb of the claw just pokes right down on the spot that I marked and set the thing off immediately. I was like, oh, Why'd I even find it? Um, and then I remember, I think it was Sergeant Paleo. He asked who was near the blast, and I was immediately on the radio going, Sherbot was, because I was so ready for a day off. Like, I mean, legitimately I was there, but like I felt like I was absolutely run ragged out there. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure most people were. Um, and I sometimes I would like just maybe the tiniest bit short of praying to get blown up so I could have a day off.
Sure.
Uh I probably prayed. I don't know. I the the amount of time and effort um that this deployment asked of us was immense. Um it it damaged my relationship with my wife because I was busy on mission, resting, or doing maintenance, or trying to find time to like shove food in my face. Um, I mean, there was more to it than that. Like we got some time to like watch movies, but like that's rest time. Like you
Mm,
need some of that. And I I didn't talk to my wife as much as I probably should have. And that kind of hurt our relationship. We got through it. It ended up okay. But yeah, it was a big strain even when we came back. Um, just kind of wrestling with, what life is now from what it was, and it took a while to kind of mend us. And I I know I could probably have benefited from uh like some mental health, some counseling and stuff like that when we got back. Um, but there's no way I was going to. Like that was career stalling stigma involved with that. Like I was trying to get promoted. I was I was on the path to get promoted. I hit a bump in the road with the whole promotion board and the PT test thing. Um, but like that was where I was going, and from my point of view, it would have stalled that.
mm,
Maybe not have stopped it, but it sure would have affected my, at least from my point of view. It felt like it would have.
mhm,
Um, and even if that wasn't, a stigma there, I don't know if I would have got counseling then. Um, on the plus side for me, my wife is like kind of my rock through that.
mhm.
And like she more or less knows everything that I went through. Um, and it wasn't long before I started opening up to her and using her as, to kind of help deal with it. And I'm very thankful that she was able to do that and deal with that and had the patience for that. Because I imagine that was also trying for her. Uh,
Sure.
and uh, like, because that would have been her first time like understanding like the danger, the risk, the what we were dealing with. And I'm sure there was a lot of internal feelings she would have had to be dealing with just to support me. And she's amazing.
Can you, I don't know if you've got more you were going to go into, but I'd be curious about, at some point, it sounds like you did engage in mental health, and I don't want to skip ahead, but I'd love to hear about that also.
um I did after my second deployment with the 22nd. I did. um
Okay,
Uh,
real
but
quick, just to put that into perspective. So you get back from this deployment in July of 2012 and
yes,
you redeploy in 2014.
I thought it was 2013.
It-
Yeah, and then we got back in 14 because then
that's a
I got
really
a
short
yeah,
period of time in between.
we had like a year, maybe a little over. I think we were like in August or September or something like that when we deployed the second time,
That's even
if I
crazy.
remember right.
You're
So I think it
already
was like 14 months
okay,
between.
and you're
Um,
already feeling you could benefit from mental health, but you go that entire period, it's already caused some strain. And then, so what are you thinking going into that second deployment, knowing some of the challenges with your relationship and like what is going on in your head?
um, well, we learned what worked and didn't work in the first one. And part of it is, she kind of understands, like we've been down this road before. Like there's a level of expectation, and that first deployment, we didn't hit that expectation. But now second deployment, there's a new expectation, this lower expectation of contact and communication. And I mean, the I guess like the facilities between the two are so vastly different. We were in like tents with satellite that Gettings figured out how to get and ordered, and like it was the it was makeshift, and it was like we all had to share this little bit of internet that we got. Like it wasn't unlimited. Like at home you feel like, you could use as much internet as you want. And we got like slivers of what we're used to on that first deployment. The second one, like we were in buildings. We had hard walls. You could knock on the walls. There was internet everywhere. It was so different. The ability to kind of like communicate back home was uh, so much more available with our second deployment. And it immediately felt different and more accessible for being able to talk back home.
Mhm.
And so uh, we were able to kind of like exceed those expectations because like our
Nice.
mission load was not the same. Some of the things were different. We were out for a couple days where we'd be going somewhere, but after, like 3 days, we'd be back home and we could, talk again. Maybe we get to talk wherever we're staying overnight, maybe not. Um, so it was maybe kind of more like long haul trucker uh hours or situation because we were kind of jumping around. We weren't always coming home every night, which is what we were used to from our first deployment. Like that was our home. We go out, we do roads, we come back. Um, and this was vastly different. Like my job was primarily gunner, which I felt like an overpaid gunner because I was a sergeant then. With like aspirations of like going to the promotion board, like even like during this deployment or immediately after. And I felt underutilized. Like our training, I don't think we went to NTC. Maybe we did before this one. I think it's like schedule wise, it didn't work out, and we ended up doing like a Yakima thing instead. Um, but like our I ran a dismount team during that training exercise for third platoon before it got kind of like broken up and shoved into other platoons. And our team was recognized, and there was awards for our performance
Nice.
like during this training thing. And then I get like shoved in the gunner's hatch, and that felt like a dick kick. Like we were the highest performing and like recognized group And I'm pretty sure at that point, like we knew one platoon was going to get like absorbed.
Mhm.
And so we were all competing during this training exercise, and we felt like we just rocked it. And I'm sure every platoon also felt like they just rocked it. So I don't know how much of it is like our perception from from like looking out versus like the company perspective of like who actually did good. But like as a like as an enlisted unit, we felt like we absolutely rocked it and shone above the rest. And then we just got like taken apart and put with other groups. And I ended up back at second platoon.
That's where you belong.
Um, but yeah, I really liked third platoon. That was I really enjoyed that leadership team, and um there was a like a dynamic, a um I'm maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe I'll find the word for it, but like there was a feeling around that platoon that was like a unique identity. Um and it was that was just so great to be involved with, and it was pretty upsetting that we got broken up and put elsewhere. Um I felt like a lot of what we learned in that first deployment didn't matter for the second deployment. It was a different plan, a different execution, different roads. Like we were primarily on paved roads. So the only thing you're really looking for is like culverts and or like an obvious patch job or something like that, or something on the roadside. And like I've spent all this time talking about that first deployment, and I could spend like 15 minutes on the second deployment and feel like it was too much.
Okay, fair enough.
Uh it it was, yes, there was danger, yes, there was IEDs, yes, there was things we faced, but like it was so much less, like not even close. And and that's saying that knowing that this deployment got me med boarded. Like I got blown up and messed up to the point where the army's like, "Nah, we don't need you."
So what's that like, the med board experience, and how do you adjust when it sounds like you wanted it to be a career and now you are having to get out?
That was really tough. You know, my career was dead. Like I had to go through the stages of grief. I wept over it. I I didn't want it to end, and I was struggling between like abusing my body and trying to make it work for a couple years and still being functional for my family and my kid and letting it happen. Like I was somewhere in that range of I could probably fight this and stay in and probably get like 2 years. I probably get to staff sergeant, but then I still like and maybe once I get to staff sergeant, I could kind of like ride it out, not being able to like do the physical stuff. Um, but it didn't seem super likely. Uh, and I know doing that would have like my quality of life would be absolute shit then.
Right?
I wouldn't be able to do scouts with my son. I wouldn't be able to go camping or hiking with him. Like, I mean, I could probably technically do those things, but not like I can now. Like there was one point um after the deployment and I got hurt, I was looking to see what it costs to get one of those chairs for your stairs that like takes you up
Oh
it.
my God.
And I'll be there someday. Not today. I'll be there someday. Like it's not getting better. It's just I mean, maybe I'll probably have a back surgery at some point, and it's coin flip how that goes. So I don't have to do it now. So I put up with it. And um like and like that's kind of the capstone for the second deployment. Like there was this big event, but there wasn't much.
Mhm.
Whereas our first deployment, like we had, you know, med board injuries throughout the deployment. Uh, I mean, there's probably a number of limbs beyond fingers that were lost. It was it was just different. It was more. And I don't really struggle with anything from the second deployment outside of, just my personal injuries and struggles um and how that's kind of changed my life because I've had to mourn my career twice because of that. The first time when I was getting out of the army, and then the second time when my migraines weren't being treated very well anymore. Um, while I was still active duty, we got a really good treatment. I was getting this Botox stuff in my neck, and that was great. It like made the migraines and the headaches and just like magic got rid of them.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, like a year, 14, 18 months later, like a light switch, they were just back, and that treatment didn't work anymore. And I had to stop working, and I haven't worked since. I got out of the army almost a decade ago. I haven't been working for like 8 years.
Okay.
Uh, so I've had to adapt to that, and it's kind of changed what I do and how I do it. And I have to kind of plan my week based on like what do I want to achieve. Like if there's something I want to do Wednesday, I have to take Tuesday easy so I can do it.
Mhm.
Uh, like like doing this. I'm looking at my computer is usually pretty tough. Uh, and that kind of spikes my migraines. I got some meds that kind of help it, that I have to take regularly. But if I'm going to be doing something like this, I'm probably chugging caffeine to help mitigate it. So I won't sleep tonight.
I should say all the more I appreciate you doing this. Um,
Uh, but I have a lot of little things that I've learned and adapted to kind of help. Like I got these glasses that kind of help with the blue light. I have a computer screen that's better than normal, so it has better features and better with the blue light. The blue light seems to be a thing. Fluorescence, definitely a thing. Sunlight, a thing. Like all of these just kind of add up and just start knocking me on my ass as far as the migraines go. And best guess is it was from that ID blast and whatever concussion that I had that isn't in my medical records. Because why would they put that in there? I'm I don't know what's in those records. Like I don't know if it says concussion or I know it says assessed for concussion because they did do that. They would have done that. That would be in there. But they tested me a couple times, and the second time I passed, but earlier times I didn't. So I assume that record doesn't say I had concussion symptoms.
I don't know how much it matters now because you
I,
probably got all the compensation, but
yeah.
let's talk about that after this and uh maybe I can help clarify what your records do and don't say.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it says that. Like the Army and the VA have assumed it is a service connected like event, because of, what an ID can do, whether or not, that evaluation says anything. Like there's there's so much reason to believe it's from this IED blast.
What about a Purple Heart? Were you
Uh,
ever
I got a Purple Heart for that one.
okay?
Not from the first deployment. It was from the second. Um, I I don't know. I don't I can't say for sure I qualified for one in the first deployment. I know I was around a lot of blasts that like you could reasonably make the argument of like uh TBI or concussion for getting it because I know that became a thing. I don't know if it was as much of a thing then. I know it was
Yes,
more so in our second deployment.
yeah, if you have
Concussions
to
became
receive medical treatment for it though. So you might have got
yeah,
a concussion, which would have been an injury, but you had to receive medical treatment for that. So what
yeah,
do they do? You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like give you a day off? Is that
yeah.
it gets really complicated.
So I mean, you might be able to make the argument in the first deployment, but I didn't like it would have been maybe a concussion, but like I was running enough blasts that like there was probably some like compounding effects
Sure.
between, you know, like I don't know, the six I was around or
Right.
involved with or in close proximity to, with like two of them being significant, with most of them being not very significant. Like the one with Parker, that would be significant.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt like I got hit by a 2x4 from Lamond, who's like the biggest guy that I could think of in our platoon, or probably can't remember the name. Gosh, I just had it. Oh well. Um, McQueen. McQueen's who I always think about for talking about that. Um, but like that, and then the blast in the second deployment, like that one disabled the vehicle. It messed up the road, and uh, it tore up my knee. I tore a tendon in my knee, and walked over to the truck with the medic in it so I could go get looked at. I and I ended up getting my Purple Heart because I cut my elbow.
I'm only laughing because that's not the first time I heard that story. And just a heads up, we got 2.5 left on this to our next
Uh,
break.
okay. Yeah, I cut my elbow. We didn't even realize it for probably like 2 hours. And I was like, man, my shirt feels wet. And it had just kind of seeped. It wasn't that bad. Like it just kind of seeped and like we didn't know it was a thing. Um, yeah, but it messed up my back, my head, my knee, pretty much all of the right side. I was in the gunner's hatch, so I hit my head on the top. I tore my PCL in my knee. Um, I have some the little uh I guess pads or whatever between your discs. Oh, the discs. That got kind of messed up in my back. Um, Shoulder hasn't been the same since. I got wrist surgery afterwards, although the wrist breakage was between deployments, and I actually deployed with a broken wrist
Oh,
and
fun.
did push-ups and getting
Hmm.
promoted and all of that. Uh, I didn't, I didn't, I didn't know it was broken, but it was like I knew something was up because I had to do push-ups on my knuckles. I couldn't do them normal. I mean, I could do it, but it was really bad. Um, but you just stick with it,
Okay,
and it's
let's
probably break
pause.
time.
Yeah, let's
Yep.
exactly it. Let's take our break and then we'll come back for the final push. We are back.
Yeah, so we were talking about dumb shit that we do to like actually go on a deployment.
Mhm.
And I'm sure like there's no way I was the only one that was going into like these deployments with something going on, whether it's physical or mental or just didn't even know. Like I'm guys are, you know, toughing it out so that they can go do their job.
Mhm.
And like I mean, you don't see that in normal spaces. I think the best thing that like people could relate to would be like sports, like professional athletes. And if they go on a playoff run, they're playing no matter what. Like as long as they can step foot on like the court or the field or whatever, like they're going to be there. And I know we had guys do it. I did it. Uh, I told you about all the things that like was wrong with me after that IED blast and my second deployment. I stayed there for like 3 more months and worked in the talk. They should have never let me do that. um, but I mean, I wanted to. I pushed it. Like I pushed to stay there, and that's why it happened. If I didn't push, they wouldn't they would have sent me home. Um, they probably should have sent me home anyways, but I'm not gonna fault them for that. Like I'm a big boy. I can make decisions, and even to the detriment of my own self. Uh, I should have got the medical attention sooner. Um, but for the most part, like it wouldn't have changed much. Like whether I went home sooner or not, like I'm still pretty much in the same position that I would have been in if I stayed. Like my knee and my back are still going to be messed up. I'm still going to have the migraines. I'm like not much changes. It just gets like dealt with earlier. Um, and I don't have the brace because of any injuries from that. That's a recent thing. Um, but uh, that's I guess it didn't matter that much. I keep telling myself I should have went back, but like in the grand scheme of things, I did probably didn't matter. Like, and unless they were going to do surgery on my knee to fix the ligament or tendon or whatever it was that tore,
Mhm.
like I'd still be in the same position. They weren't going to be able to do anything else for my back other than what I was already doing. I mean, I was already on profile, so it wasn't like I was doing anything crazy, anyways. Um, although they were trying to get me on a walk to run program. So I was actually out there running on like a torn ligament and shit like that. And it was
Ow.
so dumb. Like some of the treatment was so dumb. And I just went with it. And I knew better, but I also wanted like I wanted the reality to be different than it was. So I was acting in a way that fit the reality I wanted, where
Mhm.
I could get better and stay and keep keep doing, you know, keep doing army, keep being an engineer. Because that's what I wanted. That was my goal. I re-enlisted so I could keep staying at Fort Lewis. And I was in the process of trying to get a reclass into like prime power. I think it was 21P. Basically working on generators and power grid stuff for fobs and cops and stuff like that. More kind of technical, not dangerous, other than you're probably in little shitholes setting them up. And there's, you know, that shit gets overran or tested.
That's like
but um but it kind of was more in line with like my skill set and like what I really wanted to do going into the army. Like I didn't come in to be a combat engineer. It's kind of where I ended up. I came in to do something technical. I came in to do drafting, and then I found the prime power thing, and uh, I don't think that was a 21 series. Maybe it was. I don't know. Whatever. And then I found that, and I was like, "This is really cool. I want to go do that." I learned something new. So I was trying to do that, and eventually, I just had to accept that like I'm not going to be able to do this, and that was really tough. That's when I started seeing a counselor, getting some mental health uh, um, counseling, and I guess coming to grips with like how messed up I was still.
Mhm.
Because like at this point, like I would say, yeah, I had PTSD, but like it wasn't that bad. I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. Like up until I started getting counseling, like, was managing it with uh namely alcohol and talking to my wife. I wasn't doing anything like stupid or excessive with alcohol and drinking, or trying to find um like ride new highs or whatever to have the thrill of, battle again. Um Thankfully that wasn't a road I went down. And I know that's trouble some people have had. I just am thankful that that wasn't my path. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to having, family that I was able to share this experience with, and kind of like I had an outlet, a safe outlet that I didn't have to worry about jeopardizing my career or my standing in the unit, or um, how it was going to be perceived. It was just in my family. Uh, but yeah, I definitely was doing some coping with alcohol to just numb feelings. Um, I know I laid in bed reliving Parker getting blown up several times. I remember I had at least one nightmare with it. I don't think it was any more than one though. Nightmares, thankfully, wasn't something I was grappling with. Um, but yeah, I think that was like the single biggest thing that affected me, and um, put me on edge and was at the forefront of my mind. Um, and it took me a while to kind of like accept that wasn't even my fault. Like for years, I I blamed me because I was out there with a minesweeper before we called the dog in. And I know that's not on me. I probably did then. I still blame myself because I mean we don't want to see guys get hurt, and
Mhm.
we want to be able to like have a reason or a way to like not let it happen again. And if I know it's my fault, I can stop it next time. I can make sure it doesn't happen again.
Oh, interesting.
Um, I never blamed the dog. I think some guys do. Um, and I would understand why they would blame the dog, because like we had the dog to go out there and do this job and it failed. Like in our eyes, as our platoon, our unit, the dog failed. But it was, I think a lot of it's because we didn't understand the capabilities. Like now that I know more about like kind of the IED finding dogs and like some of how they work, like that dog was set up to fail. And it's just because of the situation. Like nobody knew that that dog was set up to fail. Nobody, you know, messed this up. It was just unfortunate.
Mhm.
And I don't I don't know if counseling ever helped me get there. I think that was just a path that I don't think I ever shared, that I had that feeling, that it was my fault to anybody but my wife, until I guess probably now, maybe. um I don't think I really kind of like verbalized that in any of the counseling I had. And it took a while to kind of like let that go. And uh I've haven't talked to Parker at all, like ever. And that's probably why I didn't want to face him, like, because I felt like it was my fault.
Mhm.
I didn't want to face that. And I mean, that was just my perception. I'm sure that's not even the truth at all. But I ran from it, like I hid from it. And so I don't know. And that was that was probably the biggest thing that I grappled with for a long time as far as um that deployment. Like that definitely like was high on the list of things that was going on that was bothering me. And um it still does. Like there's still things that I got a vasectomy and they go to cauterize and do their work, and I'm brought to that moment. And it's just weird. Sometimes little things just that don't seem like anything just kind of bring you to a moment. Uh, I remember I was driving home, road I've been on dozens of times for whatever reason. Uh, I felt like I was in the middle of an ambush, and I it was probably like 2 minutes before I realized that anything had happened, and I was just driving down the road still. I made a turn and was going home, and like my headspace wasn't there. I was like autopilot or something. Um, that's at least fairly isolated, but like the our guys are dealing with a lot of stuff. A lot of the classes I went through were kind of group things,
Mhm.
and that's what I found value in more than one-on-ones. Um, Kind of like hearing other guys' experiences and like what works for them, things they've tried, and kind of like picking pieces and trying that out for me. How does this fit? Because like there's no like solution to this other than your solution. The guy to your left and your right, that's their solution's different.
Mhm.
And what works for them isn't necessarily going to work for you. So you got to, try a lot of different pieces and see what kind of works. And um, I went through some substance abuse programs with through the VA, and um, anger management in addition to like PTSD stuff. And I never had substance issues in the way that like it was a major detriment to my life or my family or anything like that. Like realistically, it was like me drinking every night is not something that's good for the family.
Right.
Like that creates, barriers to for conversation for uh, you know, my kid was probably, walking on eggshells, not wanting to piss off dad. And uh so I had to really make that a priority because I didn't want to be the angry dad. But I was. I didn't want to be. I don't think anybody would look at me through my military career and be like, he's the angry guy. And that's what I became. And it was really hard. It still is to recognize and avoid like going down that path of just kind of getting lost in anger. It still happens. But I'm way better about it than I used to be. And I keep it in check. Um, and I remember before I went into the substance abuse classes and courses or whatever there was through the VA that I talked to my wife. I asked her, "Do I have a drinking problem?" In her eyes, I didn't. And I couldn't tell if that was because I didn't have a problem or if that was just because of like her upbringing. Because I know her dad drinks fairly regularly. So like that was probably just normal for her. And I mean, my dad drank regularly when I was growing up. And but I still felt like it was more than it should be because I recognized that I was using it to avoid
Mhm.
feeling like laying in bed to help go to sleep. And it became normal even though I didn't really need it to go to sleep. It started to become a habit instead of a coping mechanism. Um, and so kind of as I was going through some of the PTSD counseling and started to kind of like get that in a better place, um, I found that the substance thing was now the next thing to tackle, and kind of started working through that. And I go through kind of ups and downs with that. Uh, with I think I still use alcohol more than I should, and I use it to numb pain. I mean, I feel like there's an essence of how could I not? I'm like every day I'm in pain.
Mhm.
Um, because if it's not that, it's medication, which is worse. I don't know. Probably neither are good. And uh, so I go through ups and downs where I recognize, hey, this is getting out of hand, and I've learned enough that I can start to check myself, get it kind of reined back in, go a month or two of not drinking or whatever, or just toning it down so it's um, like one a night instead of, three, four. Um, and I feel like there's some systems in the VA that like are good on paper and don't necessarily work in the real world. And um, Dow's interview kind of it's kind of what brings it to mind. Like we know PTSD counseling stuff like that is important to our veterans, and so now they have like if a veteran requests help, they need to be seen in such a window. And so I think that's why he's just getting jumped around to all these different people because they're trying to hit this window, and who he normally sees doesn't have availability. So he just gets shuffled and gets somebody else every time. And a program that was meant to help kind of isn't doing what it's intended. And I know the VA was like had a bunch of trouble with like wait lists, and vets were dying waiting for service and um getting like treatments or surgeries and stuff like that. And so then they tried to do like this community care thing, and now you're getting seen by these providers that have no visibility of your medical records, and it creates just a different problem because we don't have the enough within the VA to actually handle the things that are going on with these veterans. Um, when I broke my thumb, I went to a multi-care urgent care, and they, sent those findings over to the VA, but VA doesn't have like visibility on all of it. They have notes, they don't have the imaging of the x-rays. So I had to go to the VA to get x-rays again. And it's they're like trying to fix problems, and it's like not actual fixes. And it just creates this bigger backlog because now I have to go see my primary care again before I can, go see ortho to get my thumb looked at. And I've had a broken thumb for over a week now. And I got to drive up to Seattle, at least an hour away, just to get an appointment this week. And so, even with these like programs that are supposed to help the situations, like it's creating more communication breakdowns, and uh, there's I think there's some detriment to that, and hopefully it can get like fixed or worked on, or and it's made me think about like single payer like healthcare has been a big thing um in politics last handful of years, and I can't help but look at the VA program and be like, this is their model, and how do we expand that and like absorb all these other private entities? Like, they can't even take care of what they got going now. Like, it's a patchwork system already. Like, I can't imagine it, like if this ever happens, I can't imagine it's going to be a what people want, because we can't even take care of our veterans, the guys we call heroes. And you know, that's that's rough.
So I I have some questions,
Yeah.
but I also want to be sure you've got your checklist. Did you cover everything
Yes.
your family had wanted you to cover?
Yep.
So I'd like to get your thoughts on a couple things.
Okay.
And one of them is I don't know if this was something you had heard or something you share a belief in, but often, the perception is um there's a saying more or less that goes like you never know how someone's going to react in a firefight until they get into a firefight. But I feel like that is not that big of an obstacle. I think the challenge is you don't know how you're going to react until you have to give treatment to someone that's hurt. And when you were talking about, you did an excellent job, but when you're providing treatment to Parker, but you're also in the state like,
I
where are my tourniquets, right?
Yeah.
And I had a similar experience, which is why I drew this conclusion of like, that's overwhelming. And uh was the hardest part of the deployment, I would assume for you, was seeing other people hurt. I mean, that's what I hear you say, that's what gives you nightmares. That's what, it wasn't the ID blast that messed up your career and caused all these injuries. It's seeing someone you care about get hurt.
um During the deployment, the hardest thing was during the deployment was kind of going out there day in, day out, and just being mentally exhausted. Like, constantly scanning the ground, the area, the GPR. Like, it was over, like there was so much that I was trying to take in and process and deal with, um from like that visual standpoint. And then there's like trying to accomplish this quickly, because like we're the people that we replaced, they were worried about getting in for lunchtime. When we were out there, like, we were hoping that nothing happened so we could get home for dinner time, because we were out there, like, we approached the job fundamentally different, and it was a slower different. And it was just a lot. And that was the hardest part. And that's like I said in earlier, like there was times I just wanted that day off, and I didn't care how it came.
Right.
um like, arm, yeah, sure, I'll trade. Like, that was like that's a really messed up headspace to be in. And um and that was the hardest part, like during the deployment, was just day in, day out. And even if it was a day off, Like if it wasn't because of an ID, I was in the motor pool fixing crap.
Right.
There was like there was always something. Um, unless I was mandated bed rest. And uh but then like after the deployment, yeah, the Parker thing, that was definitely like the hardest thing to kind of grapple with after the deployment. Um like nowadays it's still a thing, but like it's much more muted than it has been. Like it still bothers me and affects me.
Mhm.
Um like his like heart rate, like uh, you get anxiety from it, and just like there's I can tell like physically that it's affecting me. Um uh I mean, veteran suicide within our unit is another big one that's affected me. And one of the things my son's scout unit does is they do flag retirements. And um, sometimes there's like stories of veterans or stories about our country or a flag, and to like kind of as part of that ceremony. And um, some of those ceremonies have kind of dedicated to some of the guys that we've lost. Um, some of them I was closer to than others, like Blevins and Pickens. Those are two that really hit me hard. Um, and so that's kind of something I still deal with, because I'm sure all of us do. Like we're worried about who's next. And on some level, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm looking at it going, am I next? Because almost a decade ago, probably 8 years ago, I kind of accepted that that's the way I'm going out. I'm not I'm not in any kind of like suicide trouble or stuff, but I accept that that's probably how I go out. Things are just going to kind of add up to a point where I'm like, I'm done. I'm not there yet. I don't know when I'll be there. Part of me is surprised I'm still here, but and that's tough. It's weird. I think that a lot of what it is I'm focusing on my son, my family, and like when he's 18, he goes off to college or whatever, like what what keeps me going then? I'll have to figure it out. I don't know what it is. There'll be something. Um, but yeah, I just kind of accepted that that's I'll be one of the statistics someday.
So, we are gonna talk when this is done. We got 8.5 minutes. I just want to leave the forum open. Is there anything we haven't covered that you would like to cover?
Um, more. Thanks for putting up with my bullshit out there on route. I got him in all kinds of hairy situations, and he was awesome about it. I don't know how many times I got him stuck because I thought we could get through the route. And thanks for being my number two on the convoy. I was because he was the roller truck right behind me. Um, so thank you.
The first time I heard somebody do that, that was cool to hear. Just a thank you to
Oh yeah.
that. That was, yeah. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Then we will end the video. I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate everyone's contribution. Thank you very much for being so open about your experience as well.
Yeah, and thank you for putting this together. It's awesome, and I think it's helping some guys, and I appreciate that. And I know I've talked with my wife a lot, so like a lot of this isn't necessarily new for me to like talk and kind of vocalize. So Uh, but it's still hard, you know. This is some tough stuff sometimes.
Okay, I appreciate you all the more. I appreciate you sharing.